I really appreciate everybody being here because this is an important topic in my life. And I think as I move along in this webinar, I hope you can appreciate not only the importance of this concept of developing the art of empowering young people, but I want you, I don't care who you are, to put yourself in the place of being a young person. We're going to talk a lot about adolescence. We're going to talk about the movement from adolescence into adulthood. I can remember years ago when I first started working with young people, adolescents, and people were coming at me and asking me to do this work, and I didn't understand it. But when I look back at it, I've done a lot of work with young people and their families. And as I came out of that work and began to do more efforts to help adults, especially with mental health, substance use, and relationship problems, I soon began hearing myself say to myself, you know what? A lot of these adults that I'm working with are nothing but big adolescents. And I think you'll get a sense of what I mean by that. And in no way am I, you know, um, passing judgment or blame. It is what it is. In my own life experience, my ability to move through adolescence into young adulthood, into adulthood, has been my ability to take responsibility for my life and my relationships. And that's not always an easy thing to do. And I'm hoping this webinar will help you to think about what makes it not easy to do, but more importantly, how we can do a better job of helping young people through a very difficult process called moving towards adulthood. And again, at any point you have any questions, please let me know. I'll try to pause occasionally to give you an opportunity to type in questions. For me, the agenda for this particular piece is over the next hour, I hope for us to explore practical, meaning able to be practiced, skills and strategies to support and guide young people. And I'm identifying young people as between the ages of 17 to 28 and beyond. And I'm talking about the work to help support them into adulthood. We're also going to describe a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift is a different way of thinking about something. So we're going to describe a different way of thinking about caretakers that will engage young people as resources, allies, and partners in their change, recovery, and or self-development process. That's a critical concept because more times than not, when we talk about adolescents or young people, we tend to think that they don't know and we have to show and we have to tell them. But if you at all believe in the clear philosophy of recovery coaching, we meet people where they're at. And more importantly, it's important that we work with people as resources to best be able to help them. They know what they know. They know what we need to know. So this whole concept of treating them as allies, resources, and partners in their process, I think is a critical thing to think about. We're also going to develop what I call developing asset strengths resource tools as a practice in empowering young people. As we look at those asset strengths resources that I'm going to talk about, they very much look like recovery capital, folks. They very much look like something called social capital when people talk about adolescent development. So it's going to be an opportunity to really parallel and walk side by side in thinking about helping young people, but also as we're thinking about helping young people, I'm thinking about helping people in recovery who may not be so young in age. And this is all about helping you to develop your own art of empowering young people. And again, if you think of yourself as a young person, think of yourself as how do I empower me? Any questions or thoughts about where we're going over the next hour or so? Can you hear me? And so far, are we okay? Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to offer you a lot of images, folks, because I don't want to sit here telling you what to do and how to do it. But what I'm going to be offering you through my own experiences utilizing DART a la carte is helping you appreciate what has evolved for me over time in my humble effort to learn power and to learn how to live beyond the relationship that I have with alcohol or the relationships that I had that failed me. So when we talk about building a great life, we're talking about building a successful life is much like building anything else. It should be thoroughly thought about in advance and then carried through to completion. This is a quote from a man named Sterling W. Sill. And Jim Rohn says, whatever good things we build end up building us. That is so true. Phil in Recovery Coach Academy says, built people build people. As we build our own lives, I know in my own case, I've gained more and more interest in helping other people to build their lives because this is an easy job. This is not an easy task to work through and work at. So, I've done another I've done another PowerPoint called Developing the Art of Building a Life that I hope some point down the road I can share. But when you look at that other image, it says, find your gift. We all have gifts and talents. The Native Americans call it our own medicine. Find your gift, share your gift, and the overlapping of those two activities is your purpose in life and your purpose in living. And that whole concept of purpose of life and purpose in living has great application, a great need to be aware of as we think about helping young people through. And I'll show you why in a minute. I like this image. Frederick Douglass once said, it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Isn't that so true? So many of us have been broken as a result of not having been built strong enough to withstand the problems in living that evolve in our lives and encompass us all. Just that the effort to make one's life work is the greatest challenge or stressor that any of us will feel that we'll face and will face. So much like the previous slide talked about the importance of planning, this slide talks about proper planning prevents poor performance. This is much like doing recovery plans, doing recovery capital plans, doing recovery wellness plans. When I worked as a clinician, doing treatment plans, or developing a mission statement or a vision statement. Do you have a plan for your life? And more importantly, in our effort to guide young people, how do we help them to guide and plan their lives? How do you, as a person guiding young people, help proper? By helping proper, I mean, how do we define what proper is? How do we describe what's good and what's not good? How do we help young people and ourselves in planning and in preventing problems in living and in participating fully in life? And in that full participation in life, being able to perform well enough to feel that we're successful, to feel that we're included, to feel that we are okay. This is such a powerful piece for me. Proper planning prevents poor performance. If we want to help people to be successful, we have to help people to plan how to be so. If we leave it to chance, if it's an intentional learning, it's something that we help people to learn because we want them to learn it. If it's an incidental learning, we hope they learn it, but we're not doing much of anything to prompt that learning process. So remember what Frederick Douglass says. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. This is a very powerful image for me. White Bison Group, whose spokesperson tends to be Don Coyhis, did a very powerful video called The Cycle of Life. And in the cycle of life, he looks at the stages of human development, both as they're healthy and when they're unhealthy. The key piece for this, for me, is for you to look at the different stages of who we are as human beings. We move from baby to youth to adult to elder. And in that process, Don Coyhis talks about there are 8 feelings that we need to experience as we move through this process. And if we don't experience those 8 feelings, which are trust, autonomy means being able to do things on my own and for myself. Initiative means having the motivation and the inspiration to do things. Accomplishments means that I feel that I'm in the world and I have something to give to the world and I'm doing in the world. Identity is what we're going to talk a lot about today. That's the years of adolescence where I'm trying to figure out who I am in this big world. Intimacy goes between the ages of 19 and 30, where we try to get closer to people who have relationships that work for us. And I'm currently in the age of generativity. moving towards integrity. And the age of generativity really speaks to passing on the lessons that I've learned in my own living process, caring about future generations. And if I don't do those things, I feel stagnant and I don't feel as whole. But I really like the fact that this is a very powerful video that I've taken the image out of the video and shared it with you. And you'll see on there, there's a YouTube label there at the bottom of the source part where you can go to there and see this video. It's about a 35 or 40-minute video. I encourage everyone to watch this. And most importantly, I encourage you to watch it with children so that people can live with you and see with you how we move through life and what goes right and what goes wrong. So again, I'm trying to give you as many resources that have been valued in my own development on learning how to empower young people. But also, this has been a part of my own process of self empowerment. So I highly recommend this YouTube video called "The Cycle of Life," which is a video lesson facilitated by Don Coyes, who really speaks to Erikson's 8 stages of human development, which we're going to look at a couple of stages throughout this particular video. I'm taking what you just saw, the elder, baby, youth, adult cycle of life, as they call it, and showing you my story in regard to the cycle of life. At the top of that are the elders in this family, my wife and I, Diane. And next to my wife, Diane, on the right, you'll see my 2 grandchildren, my 2 stepsons, around my 99-year-old my 99-year-old mother-in-law on her birthday. Think about what this represents, folks. It represents the movement from a baby. If you look at my stepson David with my oldest granddaughter, Bria Joy, when she was a baby. Actually, and you'll see many babies in this picture, but these are my grandchildren. These are my stepsons. These are their grandparents. And this is my wife. This is my family. This is my story. This is the importance of me understanding and learning how to help my children through their lives, helping them through youth into adult. That's where I am now. I have an 11-year-old grandson who's at the bottom of the picture in the Cromwell 22 football outfit. In the middle, right above youth, is my granddaughter. She hates this picture because when she cries, the girl has an ugly cry. And just to the left of my crying granddaughter is my 20-year-old granddaughter who currently lives in New York City on her own. So I've got an 11-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 20-year-old that I am responsible to helping them move from being young people into adulthood. I love these images. I encourage you to do the same. When I work with young people and families, when I work with young people or adults alone, I encourage them and I help them to develop their own circle of life so they can see the responsibilities that they have in that circle and the power and the importance of that circle. Is this helpful? Any questions or thoughts so far? I'm dependent on you, Michael. Okay, let's try the next slide. For those of you might not be aware of it, Erikson has 8 stages of psychosocial development. And I'm showing you these 8 stages because they actually compare to the 3 stages that my grandchildren are in. If you look at the school age stage, my grandson is 11 years old. And that's a stage where they're learning competence. The main question is, how can I be good? How can I be responsible at being good and doing the right thing? But my grandson's 11, so he's right on the border of adolescence. And it's in adolescence, right along with my 14-year-old granddaughter, where they are challenged to gain an identity versus being confused about their role in life and in living. Some of the questions in adolescence are the key potent questions that I continue to ask adults as well. Who am I? And where am I going in my life? It's also about self-image. It's about school. It's about career identities. It's about sexual identity. For many of us who get stuck in adolescence, we are not comfortable or we can't respond to those questions very well. Think about it in your own heads, folks. How would you respond to the question, who am I? I.e., what is my identity? How do you respond to the question, why am I? I.e., what is my purpose in living? And the third question of adolescence is, where am I going? What is my direction? I think planning, especially proper planning, helps us to at least get a sense of where we want to go, i.e., our vision of our life, and begin to do some of the things to get there. That's why it's so critical to have a plan, but it's even more critical to have people support us in that plan. And again, we're talking about empowering young adults, folks, but throughout the course of this, if you can relate to this information, feel comfortable in thinking about it because much of us have a real challenge to move through adulthood. My 23-year-old granddaughter is a young adult, even though I think her adolescence is more excellent. My granddaughter at 23 years old is living on her own, and she had the love of her life of 3 years, a boyfriend who they just recently parted ways because they were both doing their own things. But the main question in young adulthood is, can I love or share my life with someone or live alone? It speaks about dating, marriage, family, and friendships. It's critical. So when you look at those stages, and those are just the three middle stages, there are a total of 8 stages. And these are where my grandchildren are. And if you look at the questions in those stages, they're very difficult questions. Think back to when you were an adolescent. Think back when you were so desirous and so wanting to become an adult. And then once we get to that place where there are expectations of being an adult, the responsibilities, the relationships, just knowing how to do it can be so very difficult. That's why it's important that we pay attention to empowering people, empowering young people through this process. Because if we admit it, folks, it was a challenge to us all. I'm going back to the image of proper planning prevents poor performance. Either we help prepare our children or we hurt them and have to repair them. And we're not hurting them intentionally, but I think if we don't intentionally help young people plan their lives, we're setting them up for poor performance. I believe that, folks. I believe that to the pit of my soul. My soul are those three young people looking at you. David is the youngest, he's 11 years old, and his sisters are Bria on the left. She's the older of the two. If you notice, Eliza is shooting beyond her and past her. Bria is 23 and Eliza is 14. Eliza and I do a lot of homework together. Much of what I'm sharing with you and I've shared over time, Eliza helps me to appreciate is helpful because we've had conversations that matter. I actively listen to her. It's all in my effort to help her through high school. This is her first year in high school. She went to the senior prom with a senior as a freshman in high school. And I love the fact that she had that opportunity, not so much for her to show off, but because, in our conversations, Eliza made me aware that in the 8th grade, she was depressed. In the 8th grade, she saw darkness in her life. And she put on a face so that people wouldn't know it. And much of her sadness, her depression, her feeling left out was related to the fact that as teenagers may do, and many times as teenage girls tend to do, a lot of people turned on her, talked about her, at some level online bullied her. So I said all that to say that's just the cement or the glue that makes this effort so important to me. I want to help my young people and any other young people that are willing to listen, and any young people that you're going to have the opportunity to help through what you might learn through this webinar. I want you to be there for them. And the more you're able to be there for them, you'll also be there for my children out in the world. So let's help them perform by helping prepare them for life and living. I talked about stage 7 of Erikson's 8 stages of human development. It's generativity versus stagnation. That's where I sit in my life right now. It's described as middle adulthood, and it's a place where you really focus on the concept of care. Care has been a very powerful concept throughout my own recovery process. In fact, when I think about my recovery, I think about it as care recovery because as a result of the stress of daily living, on top of the relationship that I had with alcohol, I've had to turn my life over to care. And for me, that's what has really fueled the recovery. So much of what I talk about is really about caring about each other to the point that we help each other through life. The primary developmental task in generativity is one of contributing to society and helping to guide future generations. That's my calling at this point in time in my life. Generativity is my concern of establishing and guiding the next generation. If you are younger than me, I'm going to make an honest effort to guide you. Because at some level, I've learned some things that I want you to learn so that you don't get burned the way I got burned. So I would hope you'd be open to what I want to share. It's my responsibility to help promote the well-being of others. Stagnation is a situation where I'm dissatisfied with that relative lack of productivity, i.e., giving to the world and giving back. This talks to parenting, educating, and being productive in my social involvement. That's the work that I do, folks. And this concept of generativity has just fueled the work because at 65 years old, I have a responsibility to share what I'm learning. And notice I said learning versus learned. Let's go back to adolescence, some of the things that I think about in relation to helping my granddaughter through. This is her this year as a freshman playing JV soccer. Her JV soccer team was undefeated. She was the leading scorer on that team. Her performance on the field is stellar, although she doesn't have as much confidence I'd like her to have. I don't think she has as much determination as a result of that confidence because, again, that darkness that she saw last year, the doubt that comes through to her sometimes when she questioned even if her teammates liked her. So, so it's really about helping her to perform, not so much on the soccer field, but to perform in her daily living. And there's so many challenges and pressures and stressors that we all face that we all need some help. And in the midst of this all, she's a wonderful soccer player, and she and I talk a lot about balancing her books and her studies and her social life. And isn't that a major part of what we need to learn as we move through adulthood or we moved away from the adolescence into young adulthood and being young people? Adolescence is the period of psychological and social transition between childhood and adulthood. The teen species has moods, drama, thinking about high school, stress, awkward hormones. I like those images, folks. That's my granddaughter, Eliza, again. Probably when she was just born, again when she was just starting soccer, and now as a freshman in high school. This is what I'm talking about. I've got to be there to help her through. She excels in so many parts of her life. She has so many gifts. And yet, all of those things in that white box below, especially the drama and the hormones and the emotionality and the stress and the awkwardness and the formative times and the puberty and the mood angst and the fine print that we can't see, including the word identity and anxiety, that's all a part of moving from childhood to adulthood. And folks, some of us don't make it, do we? I certainly was a victim of that. I had a real struggle to move through that transition because it is so about thinking and psychology and more of all relationships and social transitions. Hard work, and we need help to do it. Erickson's psychosocial theory of developmental adolescence. Notice the ages 12 to 18, or 20, or 22, or 24, or 44. Think about that. This stage looks at the identity versus role confusion. It's a time for testing limits, for breaking dependent ties, i.e., family, especially parents, and for establishing one's own identity. The major conflicts in this stage are on clarification of who I am, on life's goals, and life's meaning. Those of us in recovery are there, aren't we? Those of us in recovery are challenged to meet this developmental stage that we want to look as adolescence. And we don't want to put an age on it because it's ageless. If I continue to struggle with who I am and what my role in the world is, then I am still struggling with issues of adolescence. It's not a bad thing, folks. It's not something to be judged or blamed about. If you go back to the Cycle of Life video, it'll give you some very powerful information on how recovery helps us to make up for some of the feelings that we didn't gain in certain stages, some of the tasks or some of the skills and some of the strategies that we didn't gain through our own livelihood and lives. You know, at 24 years old, I was stuck in the world. I had a Yale education. I had gone to a very powerful college prep school. But at 24 years old, I was clueless on how to live my life. So clueless that even though I completed Yale, I drank myself out of law school because I didn't know what I didn't know about how to live life. And I had no one that I trusted enough to help me. That's what I'm talking about, folks. As coaches, as parents, as mentors, as people who care about other people, including ourselves, it's important that we let help as we try to traverse and overcome the challenges in living life. And I share this especially for parents who are struggling with adolescence right now. And yeah, that's Eliza, my granddaughter. That's a tattoo because her dad wouldn't let her have a real tattoo. But she's so cute. I love that picture because there's some semblance of confidence in her there. But I have to appreciate, and I think that her parents and her grandma struggle to appreciate that this is her time for testing the limits. This is her time for trying to figure out who she is and breaking away from parental control. This is her time to become who she's going to become. And it's critical that we support and guide that process versus feel abused by it or overly stressed by it. This too shall pass is one of those concepts we need to think about in relation to the travels through adolescence. Some more thoughts about adolescent development. It's a very vulnerable time. It can be a very dangerous time. It has time with lots of potential. It's certainly an opportunity. And yet, it talks about who am I? Is this or am I normal? There's issues around family. I mean, I'm just trying to impress you with the fact, folks, there's so much to know and to learn. And do not expect that young people between the ages of 17 and 44 or 54 know. They may profess to know. They may try to convince you that they know, but we don't know what we don't know about how to get through this. Just another picture of adolescence, and being adolescent is being academic, i.e. school. It's being adult or trying to be adult. It's being social with friends, and it's being related to parents and siblings, and finding a way to juggle all of this. What a challenge. Where there's a present focus on the work in front of them, and yet there's this future focus on what's ahead of them. So much about college, so much about relationships and family and the like. A lot to try to get through. It all boils down to this. We expect adolescents moving to young adulthood to go find themselves. I'm saying we have to help them find themselves. We have to help them to work with tasks that help them to describe and think about who they are. We want them to think about where they're going. And we want them to think about, what am I here to do? What is my purpose in living? How am I important in this world? What makes me special? What are my gifts and my talents? This all goes to say that I am are two of the most powerful words, for what you put after I am shapes your reality. I am confident. I am afraid. I am caring. I don't care. I am strong. I am weak. I am both andness. I am both a beast and I'm an angel at the same time. And sometimes I think adolescents and adults struggle with that concept. And in reality, it's all about finding out who you are, tapping into and embracing the parts that you experience, and work at developing beyond the parts that you may not like to experience. And that's the practice that I try to help my grandchildren to embrace. It's okay to be you. I'm not attached to the outcomes. I more want to gain wisdom with you relative to where you're going and most importantly, how you are getting there. Challenges and opportunities for adolescents are issues about feeling competent as a person, feeling the ability to be effective in social relationships. We talk about recovery capital, they talk about social capital and a social network of adolescents, facing the social arrangements and conditions of adolescence, and making an effort to meet the external demands of parents, friends, school, the environment, racism, sexism, bullying, all of the things that people have to deal with in their environments, and then try to find a way to be in this world and realize your own personal goals and aspirations. These are challenges that we want to talk with young people or adolescents about as we help them to move through. So many of the times we're more about arguing, conflicting versus collaborating on the issues that are at hand. I encapsulate this work as developing asset strengths resource tools. You see that at the bottom. That's another DART acronym that I use. Developing asset strengths resource tools. I'll introduce you to asset strengths in a minute. But I want you to think about this whole concept. This is actually the 10 components of recovery. But in working with adolescents and young people and helping people to move through adulthood, I'm also working these same concepts that recovery, the 10 components of recovery also offer a way of living. And if you know that AOWL, a way of living, learning, and leading life. Think about the difference between living your life and leading your life. If you've got a plan, you are leading your life. If you don't have a plan and just sort of leave things to incidents as they happen, then you're just living or surviving. I'm encouraging leading your life, having a sense of where you're going, having a sense of who you are, and having a clear sense that you do have a purpose in this life is a question of you being able to uncover it, discover it, and share it with the world. And that's what I'm making an effort to do now through this generativity stage. I've got a complete PowerPoint that talks about who am I, the process of discovering self. It's an ongoing process that clearly starts in early adolescence and moves us through adulthood and throughout our lives. I talked about a paradigm change relating to working with adolescents, and this is the critical issue for me. I've done a more extensive piece that I called Empower You, and it also identifies a paradigm change that I also have used in my work as a recovery coach, and yet it also clearly applies in working with adolescents and young people. Instead of looking at young people as the problem, let's look at them as being problem solvers. Instead of looking at young people as being our clients, let's look at them being change makers. And in that process of being change makers, instead of being an object or recipient in relation to the care or the services that we offer them, I want young people to participate with me, be a co-participant, i.e., be a resource in the process. That's a paradigm shift. It's clearly a paradigm shift that we are taking in relation to recovery coaching, but I think it's also a paradigm shift that has a great reward in applying it to working with adolescents and young people. Versus looking at adolescents, especially adolescents of color, as being at-risk populations to deal with, let's look at their leadership potentials and look at them being a leadership asset to be cultivated, to be nurtured, to be intentionally educated so that they can become the most that they can be based upon their wishes and desires. Instead of looking at young people or adolescents as tomorrow's leaders, let them help them be a part of today's leadership team. Much like CCAR's willingness and Bob Savage's demand and perception that people in recovery be at the table as we plan for recovery services, the same has to apply in planning for young people's lives. They have to be at the table. We must expect them to take a leadership role because the more they practice leadership as young people, the more they will be able to lead their lives, lead their families, lead their organizations. Instead of looking at young people as an adult in the making, let's look at them as citizens today and help them to become the best citizens that they can be. I look at the road to recovery again. I only bring it back again. It also identifies those developing asset strengths recovery tools. But again, another PowerPoint that applies to this one that I've done called is strength to find a way, i.e. the whole concept of empowering self. Soul Help Acts, i.e. Household Dart is the vehicle that I use to help. Soul Help Acts empower you. I want you, if you're not appreciating it yet, when we talk about empowering young people, empower you too. Empower you too. That's how you empower others. This is an image that I developed, oh, good 15 years ago, and it really encapsulates what I do. I call my work Soul Help ACTS. And if you see the acronym for ACTS is in there, it says Assessment, Challenge, Teach, and Support. It's on the ladder. If you look on the ladder, the rungs of the ladder are humble effort to learn power. I'm helping people to move from a chicken lifestyle where they take stuff in, they put stuff out, and they end up being eaten to to eagle. When I first start working with young people, I ask them to think about an eagle and a chicken, and what's the difference between an eagle and a chicken. And they quickly come up that chickens don't fly, they're confined, many of them eat their own shit, they're very social, and they tend to be penned up, and they're relied upon for food, whether they're eggs or they're eaten. An eagle, and they're not as free as an eagle is. An eagle is free, majestic, respected in our world, a symbol of freedom. They want freedom, folks. They want freedom to be themselves versus chickens living in a chicken coop, eating their own shit. I wanted to bring the Recovery Coach Academy stool to the fore because this is, again, in developing the art of coaching recovery, developing the art of coaching empowerment. For me, they're the same concept. We actively listen, which is an ongoing practice of skills and techniques. We ask good questions, another ongoing practice of skills and techniques. And in discovering and managing your stuff, I'm encouraging you to empower you to help others. That's what this is about. This is about, sure, how do we empower young people? We empower ourselves first. You've heard me say that if you're going to help to lead someone along a road to recovery, you need to be a few steps ahead of them. The same concept here. Discover and manage your stuff, which is a process of self-empowerment, which is, again, a piece of the work that I do through DART. How to get the most out of DART is a preamble that I worked out years ago and worked with adolescents. How to get the most out of DART takes that sentence and then builds it down. How to get the most out of DART: honest work and effort, open your mind, willing to learn, trust the process, open your heart, get active and involved, experiment with new ways of behaving and relating, take responsible risks, think before doing, hear what others have to say, encourage others to share, make the team meetings part of your life, operate responsibly, share your thoughts, feelings, needs, fears, and questions. Think about what you're learning. Overcome your fears. Understand what you're learning. Think. Open your heart. Focus on the life work, which is developing asset strengths, responsibility, and thinking. When I do this with groups, whether it be adolescents or young adults or young people, I ask people to identify one or two lines on this piece that they struggle with or they are challenged by. And it's always helpful for them to look at it. Again, I developed this in my beginning to work with young people, and it's worked over time. I think I developed this back in 1990 something, working with a drug and alcohol resource team group that I was doing. This is just some more work on active listening that I want you to pay close attention to. If you look at I DART active listening techniques, you know what they are, folks. You listen, you're open. Probe means asking good questions. And the spout is closed to clarify or to commit to the conversation, but you always want to check if you're being understood. You always want to check if you're understanding. It's skillful learning and active listening. Can't get away from it. Listening builds stronger relationships, creates a desire to cooperate among people because they feel accepted and acknowledged. Very powerful story there. We're talking about helping young people. My granddaughter is 14 years old. At 13 years old, we decided that she was having too much of a hassle trying to do her homework with her parents. They just weren't helping her, it seemed. They were getting into more conflicts and arguments. So my granddaughter and I started to do homework together. And I began to use the legs of the stool in the Recovery Coach Academy. I actively listened to her. I asked good questions. I kept my stuff out of the way. And as we did that, we were doing a session on doing her homework, and in the middle of the session, she stopped and said, "Grandpa, I like doing my homework with you because you listen to me." Think about when people listen to you. It makes you feel accepted and acknowledged and that you're important. Remember that. I give you another citation that's been very helpful. It's the searchinstitute.org. You can go to their site and they have some very valuable information. I had an opportunity in working with the Massanutten Pequot tribe. They're the people who own Foxwoods Casino. I've been working on their reservation now for about 25 years. And they sent me and a friend of mine to Minneapolis to the Search Institute's conference of a 5-day conference. And I brought back their developmental assets piece, and I'll show you how I've used them. But it's discovering what kids need to succeed, and it's research-based, and that's why I put it in here. Search Institutes works with schools, programs, families, and communities to use the developmental assets framework to measure and increase the external supports, recovery capital, and internal strengths, recovery capital, they need to grow successfully. The framework of developmental assets, which is very much like recovery capital, combines a research-based approach to child and youth development with practical, actionable ways to prepare young people for success in some type of college, career, or citizenship. Folks, there's stuff out there that helps us to help. It's important that we learn it and we teach it. It's important that we gather this information as we help young people. Let me show you what I've done with the developmental assets piece. I've developed this image called strengths development. If you notice, there are assets that build, those assets build into internal responsibility, as I call it. The assets that the Search Institute speaks about are having the young person or a young person have a commitment to learning, a positive way of living, social competency, a positive identity. Those are things that have to be intentionally worked on and with young people. If someone is working with me, whether it be a young person or an older young person, and if they don't have a commitment to learning, it's going to be very difficult for them to change. Another one of the assets that he talks about, and the Search Institute talks about, is support, empowerment, boundaries, and expectations and constructive use of time. These are all things that I think come into play when we talk about recovery planning. But most importantly, they are a part of the process of planning to help young people move into adulthood, to take on responsibility. I'll make a bigger picture. And if you notice the assets, the beliefs, what are my beliefs about myself, my beliefs about my connections, my beliefs about spirit? These are all questions. These all have the potential to be questions to be asked of young people as you ask good questions to help them to get a sense of where their strengths may lie. Clearly, the work that you can do on assets is the work that's most potent an individual can do, but it moves beyond that. What are my connections? Personal, family. See, this is all a part of the environment. The Native Americans call it the healing force that must come into play for change to occur. And then the developmental activities to build those assets and strengths include learning, engaging young people, expanding their assets, and collaborating with them. So how can we not partner with them if we're going to help them to develop in those ways? I think it's powerful stuff, folks. I've been using it for the last 20 years, and it clearly fits the model of recovery coaching, and I think even more it fits the model of helping and empowering young people. I just broke it down even more. If you notice a commitment to learning, it gives you more specificity. Specificity, the assets are the same, strength, assets, development, internal. This is your responsibility, I tell a young person. You are responsible for having a commitment to learning, learning a way of living well, having social competency, positive identity. And look at the skills and the opportunities that are just involved in that internal personal responsibility in building strengths, assets, personal capital. Empower You is the vehicle I use to do this work. I support, I work at empowering, I offer boundaries and expectations around the work as identified as how do you get the most out of DART, and I help people to constructively use their time. I have young people who text me, email me, call me, send videos to me all day long. I've got about 7 or 8 young people now I'm really working hard with, and I'm talking about between the ages of 17 and 40. Time for questions. Time for any thoughts you may have. Let's take a couple of minutes, just anything you want to throw. I'll put this back up because for me, if you walk away with anything, please walk away with this diagram. It so fits how and what we do relative to help thinking about people building recovery capital. Now we're talking about, and some of the literature speaks of it in this way, building social capital, building relational capital within young people. How do we do that? But more importantly, our commitment to doing that is critical to the process of helping. Thoughts, questions, comments, feedback. Was this helpful? When I think about help, it's a humble effort to learn or lend power. When I think about DART, it's whatever the acronym represents. Today, the acronym represents developing art of empowering young people. It's also been the drug and alcohol resource team, but it also could be the art. And I can appreciate that. So when I ask if it's helpful, it's important to me that this work helps you to help others. It's important to me that this work sparks some thinking about things in a way you may not have thought about them before that helps you to grow, that helps you to develop your own strengths and assets and capital so that you can pass it on. I'm passing on what I've learned. I'm sharing what I've learned so people don't get burned. I hope it was very helpful. I appreciate your time, folks. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Again, this is my work. This is where I am, and this is what's most important to me. And clearly, Mike, you and your crew, I'm going to do as much as I can to sprinkle this on y'all. And let me know, test it out, work it out, think about it. Let us know even more what would be more helpful beyond this. Thanks, Mike, and thank your volunteers. You guys are doing wonderful work. Bless you all.